Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to have you guys here for coming back with our self-care series on Tuesday this week. And I don't fully know what Shambrhee's going to talk about, which, by the way, I already got distracted. This is Shambrhee Burton, one of my all-time good friends. I was her supervisor, which I don't even feel like she needed supervising because she has always been a top-notch person. I feel like she is my sister. We call ourselves twinsies, and I love her to death. She is so intelligent, and the topic she has for us today is a heavy topic, but beyond important. And so, Shambrhee, I can't thank you enough for stepping up to the plate and being willing to talk about this. And I already told Shambrhee, if I cry, I cry. But anyway, Shambrhee, kind of tell us a little bit about you, and then just take it away.
All right. Well, first, I want to say thank you, Katie. I'm so glad that you asked me to do this, even though, I hate stuff like this. But of course, I love that you're doing this. I think it's important. First, let me start off. I am Shambrhee Burton. I am an LCSW. I work for Bose Cares in Fort Smith, which is a nonprofit organization that works with individuals with developmental and intellectual disabilities. I do work with outpatient as well. I see Medicare and Medicaid there. However, I also work for myself. I have a 100% telehealth clinic where I see individuals and I see couples, and I do a sliding scale fee. So I do not take any insurance with that. And my main population that I work with is African-American women that are professionals. And I do also love working with just single moms. That's kind of my niche where I love to work. So that's a little bit about me. I want to say my topic today, I did change. I will say me and Katie were supposed to do this on Thursday, but things happened. But I'm kind of glad because I did change my topic because of recent events. And so my topic is concerning boundaries. I was going to talk about how to set boundaries, but I think we really need to discuss breaking racial boundaries. So with that word racial, it can be interchanged with, you can use community if that feels better for you. You can use generational. But regardless, I think we need to discuss breaking boundaries due to recent events. And I think everybody's pretty much aware of what I'm talking about with Mr. Ahmaud. We have a young Black male that was killed for doing something that many do that helps with mental health. He's out jogging in his community, and he is killed for that because of two other men's unjust boundaries that they have set and their assumptions. And quite frankly, I'm sick of it. And so I wanted to discuss that today because I think as a minority, not just an African American, I'm talking about the Hispanics, I'm talking about the Asians, I'm talking about all of us. We are sick of it. And I want to discuss how these boundaries are really affecting our mental health in ways that, I'm going to be honest, I'm talking to majorities, the white America, how you can play your part and do what you need to do to help us change this. So one, let's just talk about what are boundaries, right? It's pretty simple. That's elementary. We put boundaries in place and they help us to deter and help us how we interact with other people. So it just helps with our interactions. Essentially, there are limits. There are limits we put in place on how we want people to touch us, talk to us, treat us, emotionally. But the problem is we have a majority that is putting unjust boundaries on minorities. And that is drastically detrimental to their mental health. And so we look at, the Hispanics right now. We have children living in detention centers. They have been ripped from their families, and they're still living there. I can't imagine what they're going through. We have the Asian culture right now who are being mocked, who, are being told, you're dirty, you have the China virus. We have African Americans who are now afraid to go running. And this is because of the assumptions that others have. And so I want to talk about today just some ways that we can break those boundaries, things that we can do that is important to help, because this is affecting our self-care. One term I want to start off and talk about is intergenerational trauma. And so we hear that so often for the population that is oppressed, right? So we look at African Americans who have been in slavery, who went through civil rights, and that trauma that they went through has been passed down. And so now, me, being of descent of African Americans, I have a trauma based off of what my ancestors have dealt with. Well, we look at it like that so often, but we forget to look at it on the other side. Right? Being white American, being taught to have these unjust boundaries and assumptions, guess what? Those are passed down. Yes, I believe that many white Americans do not have those thoughts, but guess what? They're still there. And so the first thing to do to start breaking down boundaries is know your thoughts. Know that you have implicit biases. Know that you have stereotypes, assumptions. They are there, and that's hard. That's hard to look at that and know that we have those. But that's the first step. You have to address it and acknowledge it in order to move forward from it. Um, I hear a lot of people say, well, I have Black friends, or I'm colorblind. Please, guys, stop. Stop. That's not enough, because that one Black friend does not represent the whole cultural group there. And so that's not enough. And understand you're still going to have those. I have them, as well. Being a minority, you're going to have implicit biases. So understand that you have those and the power in your thoughts. So because I think of something this way, guess what? It does affect how I'm going to behave towards someone. And so that is why this is the first step. Know your thoughts. Know that they're there and you're going to have them. Okay. I think that is very important. So one way to kind of work on those thoughts is get out of your comfort zone, right? Get to know each other. That's one thing I loved about Katie being my supervisor. We had a lot of deep thoughts, and deep conversations. She would ask me personal things, but it wasn't for me to tell a whole group. She was getting to know me. She was getting me out of my comfort zone, which I had to do because as being a white woman, right, there were some things I didn't want to discuss with you, but it was necessary, right? And so understanding we have to get out of the comfort zone. I loved what they did for Mr. Ahmad, right? They have the protest people running. They were running for him. I think that's great. However, I saw a post and I agreed with it. It hit home. You got to run in your safe white neighborhoods. You don't truly know what it feels like to be worried about who's behind me, what are they thinking, am I going to be safe? So I challenge white America, the majority, get out in these communities, don't just go to Mr. Jones barbecue in the hood and pick up. Know them, get to know that. And like you stated before, just the awkwardness, being okay with that, being okay and saying, I'll be honest, this is different for me. I haven't been in that community. Be real, be vulnerable. That is important in this situation. Get out in the communities. Also, I see often, and Katie, I think you can understand this, right? I know with your children, you talk about how they are of mixed race. You will do them a disservice if you do not allow them to immerse in their culture. If we do not, these families that have, whether it is a Black child or a mixed child, if you want them to have that hairstyle, but they can't go over there to the neighborhood to get it and sit in the shop for 4 to 6 hours, you're not really giving them what they need, okay? Because for us in the culture, sitting in that barbershop, sitting in the salon for 6 hours, that is who we are. That is part ingrained in us, okay? So you're taking away from that. So please understand that's what that looks like, getting out of your comfort zone. Having that dialogue, saying, this is new for me, I don't know. That's okay. You should know, and allow me to be there and be that teacher for you. So understanding you have to get out of your comfort zone, but that's not easy. It's not. And we have to shift our values and our thoughts that we have regarding that. Also, we must teach our family differently. So many of us grow up with parents that have thoughts, and that goes for minorities and majorities, right? We grow up with those kind of jokes that we have that are inappropriate. And we start saying them around our children. And then we have that generation in the middle who doesn't stand up. They don't agree with it, but you don't call them out for that. You're enabling that. You're teaching your children, that there are differences. It is okay to have those assumptions. And so when you are raising your family, please teach them different. Show your children, oh, we have a new family in the community and they look different from us. Let's go get to know them. Let's not base our assumptions off of conditioning and, things that are already out there. Get to know them. Teach your children how to get out of their comfort zone and how to know a minority group. Like I stated before, speaking up, I think that is really important. That's hard. It's not easy and it's scary. It really is. But please know that it is important, because nothing will be done if you don't speak up. So that is telling, Dad, hey, Dad, I don't appreciate that. I'm trying to not teach my children how to have these negative assumptions, this bigotry. It's not okay. When we do that for our children, when we see that, we're teaching them, that, hey, this is not okay. that people are different, and that is okay. And it's okay for me to not go with the crowd who normally has these comments. So please understand that speaking up, it's not when your Black friend is around that's important. It's also when they're not around that you need to be speaking up and making sure you're saying something. We also need to make sure that with changing our legal and judicial system. Now, I know that's not easy, and honestly, one person can't do that. But that starts with everything else that I just mentioned, right? We have to understand that there is a difference, that we have Black men incarcerated at a higher rate, that they get sentences that are way longer than their white counterparts. Matter of fact, there was a story, Mr. Shannon Brown in Georgia, who someone was intruders in his home, coming through his home, and he shot a warning shot. Well, guess what happened to him? He was arrested, right? That is not okay. And we have to look at the differences. And so what does that tell me as an African American, right? I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe in this community. And so we have to understand that until we start taking some steps, this is going to affect our mental health. And so when we look at that, here it is, and I'll self-disclose, recently, me and my husband and my son were out walking, and there were cops around. And I had an emotional and behavioral response. I started sweating. I started walking faster. I told Freddie, do you see that? Like, I started having negative thoughts. And this is what happens when we have unjust boundaries. When I see on here that there's a young Black man that was running that was shot, this is negative for me. And as a whole, white America, we can expect for us to heal the minorities if you aren't doing your part. Our mental health is also on your shoulders. You guys must change as well. You must also address that, yes, we live in a higher stress rate. We live with higher anxiety, and that is going to affect our mental health. And it's not just because of what we're doing, it's also because of what's being done to us. And so some things to understand, some don'ts. Please don't expect one Black person to be the go-to for the whole population. And that goes for any minority. I'm different. Even within my community, you will not meet another Shambrhee. I have different experiences, things I like. I remember being at a meditation conference, and I essentially was kind of, I won't say targeted, but spotlighted because I was the only Black person there. And guess what? I knew that. But there was a woman who was like, oh my gosh, Shambrhee, you're changing my stereotypes. And that kind of made me cringe. Because that's not okay. That's not okay. And she didn't come from a negative spot. But, instead, how about get to know Shambrhee as a person instead of the fact that she's changing your view of how you see all Blacks, those things, those are tough to deal with. Don't justify the behaviors that are happening. So same with Mr. Ahmad, right? Now we're seeing this video of him walking through a new construction home. And for some reason, that's a justifiable thing for him to get shot. That is not okay. We see that too often. Please do not justify these behaviors. Don't justify your dad's thinking, well, that was how his dad was, so he's like that too. Please, please, that is not okay. That is not going to change anything. Don't take opinions personally. So, like I stated, Katie, there's been times I've kind of, said, well, I don't agree with that with you. You didn't take it personal. And I want to say thank you, because that's what's necessary, right? Same for you. You can tell me something and I don't need to take that personal. Take that as a time to listen, which that goes into some do's, right? Validate, please. Validate that experience that I had walking and seeing police, that sucked for me. Even though you can say, well, Shambrhee, he wasn't worried about you. Please validate that the fact that there's past trauma for my group that is affecting my mental health right now. Listen, right? I think that's important too. We're so ingrained to problem solve that we forget to listen to what the group is saying, what that person is saying, and that is really important. Please listen to what we are saying. Ask questions. Don't assume. Ask me. I think that's important. We forget that we see things and we think that's the way it is, or we see the media and we think, oh, that is law, and that's not the case. Ask questions, please. That starts a great dialogue that needs to be had. Support. So like I stated, I think it's awesome that many people are out there running, but what are you going to do further? Again, you are getting to run in your comfort white neighborhoods where police aren't patrolling. They aren't stopping you, asking you, why are you out here? So where do you go further to make sure that you are truly supporting and making changes? Again, and that goes next, make some changes, right? So Katie, come to me, ask me about, where would I like to go eat, and say, I don't have preference. Ask me, to take you to some other places, with your daughter, right? Having hair that's more like mine, asking questions and being okay with that, allowing me to help. And don't take that personal, because I may have more knowledge than you, right? And be transparent. That is important. I've also had a coworker before. We were sitting and talking about music that we liked, and I said, "Oh yeah, I listened to Kenny G," and she cracked up. And the beauty that I liked in that moment was because she said, "You know what? I'm going to be honest. Like, I literally had a stereotype. I was completely surprised that you listened to Kenny G, right?" And I accepted that because she was honest with herself. And she was open with that. And it was a learning environment. And it opened dialogue for her to say, well, what are your other interests as well? So being vulnerable, being yourself is very important. And understanding that changes need to be, had right now. I need for white America to understand how seeing the trauma, being on Facebook and getting to see a Black man killed, and then go and see the comments of it being justified, of people assuming the negative first, that he's a criminal, what that does for my 6-year-old son, what that does for my husband, what that does for me, what that does for all of us as minorities. It is damaging. It is very damaging, to the point that it's going to take several generations to even start seeing some changes. And so we need to do some work now. That's very important. There's so much I want to say, and I don't want to go too far, but Katie, I kind of want to throw it there. Do you have any input, any feedback, any questions regarding kind of what I briefly went over today?
Yeah, I'm just taking it all in. And I think, I'll be honest, it took me a long time. And I think I can't speak for white America, just like you can't speak for Black America. But for me personally, it took me a long, long time to even realize, when it used to be a trigger for me when people said white privilege, because I was like, you don't know my life. You don't know what my parents had to work for. Things weren't handed to them. And that's, I think, a big stance white America takes. And that was really, really hard for me to see. And I'm going to be honest, I don't know if I saw it until I adopted biracial children.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, oh, because that was a completely different set of goggles for me. And it's a lot, and it's going to make me emotional. So what I did, and I would ask for recommendations, is I went to friends, lots of friends, friends who would be honest with me, friends who I could ask the tough questions to, friends, all that. But I also read. I read a lot. One of my favorite books is I'm Still Here by Austin Channing Brown. I love her. Also, the name is slipping me. So I encourage people to read. I also want to say, like, there's steps. What I noticed in myself from white America is there's denial, and there's like, this is not happening. This is not happening. Like, and we see it through our lens. So maybe I'm not racist. So I'm assuming because I'm not racist, every other white person isn't racist. That's crazy. So it's complete denial. Like, just because I like chocolate cake doesn't mean every white person likes chocolate cake. That's delusional to believe. Just because I might not be racist doesn't mean maybe my next door neighbor is, who's white. I don't know what they believe. So to assume that people aren't racist is just ignorant, period. So you have denial. And then the next stage you have, that I sat in for a very long time, and I saw it's funny, but it's true, is at this guilt stage. And I've talked to you about this. This was because I was in it when you were my supervisee, and that guilt of like, I want to show African American and minority people I'm not scared of them. So I walk past a white person in a grocery store, but like a minority, I'd be like, and so you see this. And I saw this post the other day that's like, oh my gosh, like, just say hi, or just don't talk, like whatever, but that's a very real stage.
Yes, that's true.
That it's like, just smile and
to overcompensate.
You overcompensate and it wasn't necessarily to make me feel better. It was, for me personally, I can't speak to other people, but for me personally, it was just like, I want to be so welcoming to know that you're welcome in this place, when really it was probably creepy.
Creepy, yeah.
And then once you like can get past it, then it's like acceptance and normalization. But I will say with this side still comes some of this, because I live over here and I'm like, I'm not racist, like at all. I still find things inside me that I was brought up with that I find buttons. And I'm like, oh, but I have to be willing to admit that and be willing to walk on eggshells. I have to I have to be able to speak up, whether it means getting cast out by friends or family.
Yes.
Like, it's ridiculous. And speaking for at least me as a white person, that when I go to post about a mod, my first thought is, oh my gosh, I'm about to tick a lot of people off. Like, that should speak volumes.
Mm-hmm.
That's insane. I cannot, and like I could care less what people think about me, but that's my first thought. And that should speak enough about saying, like, what are we doing? Mm-hmm. We've got to stop and ask ourselves the hard questions, and we can't do it unless we're willing to have open dialogue like this.
Yes, yes. And that's why I thank you. You know, I didn't want to go too deep today and all of that, because I love what you're doing, and I wanted to make sure it kind of stays on that self-care series. But like I said, understanding when we're talking about mental health, and I think so often we focus on an individual, right? We just take it, and that's why we're social workers, because we're systemic, right? Yeah. We have to understand it's a community effort. And right now, the community is failing our minorities. We are failing them, and we can expect them to be okay and you know, function well at work, you know, be able to take care of the children, pay bills, stay physically healthy. Yes. When I'm worried about a simplest thing as being able to, whether it's sit in my car, be in my home and be safe, you know. And so, like you said, understanding for you that uncomfortable of just, oh, am I going to be outcasted or am I going to tick people off, is very minor, you know, and I love you to death, but compared to minor. What minorities are dealing with, you know, Absolutely. We have to understand it's a community effort. If we're going to change how mental health is and how people are going to be able to care for themselves, it literally is a community effort, and the community needs to come on, because we're tired. I'm going to be honest. This isn't, and I'm tired. We're getting desensitized, right? Now we're expecting to see these videos. You're like, when's the next time, you know, a Black man is going to be killed? And that is not okay. We have to change that. And so I'm glad that you're allowing me to come on here and be able to talk about that.
Well,
it's hard.
Yeah. In fact, me and you maybe need to brainstorm about maybe some weekly something we can do after the self-care series, and just figure out, because I want to know how to even help more. I know people who want to know how to help more, and I want to help people transition from the denial to the guilt to the realization, actualization, whatever we want to call that. And, you know, how do we transition? How do we find our beliefs that are ingrained in us, to how do we get out of that guilt stage, to how do we move on to acceptance and actualization? And maybe we need to do a series on that, because I would totally love that.
Yes, I do. And I love how you broke that down. I think that, you know, that is more concrete, and it makes sense. So I love that. And I'm up for it. You know, I'm down. I love it.
Let's do it. Well, Shambrhee, I can't say thank you enough. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being willing to do the hard topic. Everybody, I will post Shambrhee's information on how to get a hold of her. You've seen how amazing she is, and this is just the teeniest nugget. She is absolutely amazing, so I highly recommend her. She's a dear friend of mine, and so give her a call, reach out to her. But Shambrhee, thank you again, and we will be back on Thursday. Yep, because it's Tuesday. We will be back on Thursday for the next self-care series. You guys have a good day.